So I just finished Enemy of God. That's Bernard Cornwell's Warlord Chronicles trilogy book 2, and I absolutely loved this book. This might be my favorite book 2 of all time. I was gripped from page 1 all the way to the last page. I couldn't stop reading or listening last night, so it kept me awake. I'm tired today, but that's okay. It was worth it. I could not believe what was happening in the end. But honestly, from the beginning through the middle, all the way to the end, it was all amazing. The first book I liked a lot, and it was a lot of setup. It was hard to get my bearings with all the new places and names and the political situation in Britain at this time and who the different British kingdoms were and who was enemies that were invading or causing trouble from outside. There was a lot. And all that setup, though, pays off so magnificently. And I'm going to get into spoilers. So if you have not read Enemy of God yet, please turn this off right now. Don't continue. Come back after you read it or finish listening, because I want to talk about what happened in here. So spoilers from here on out. In the beginning, I was almost in agony as Cynwyn was about to be married off to Lancelot. And so from the beginning, there's this dreaded thing that's happening, although it seems like Dervil, the narrator, the way he's narrating it, that it just seemed like it was going to turn out good. And it did when Cynwyn decided not to marry Lancelot and turn toward Dervil. And then this book just starts off amazingly with this wedding scene that does not go according to Arthur's plans. And instead, Dervil breaks that bone and Cynwyn makes her decision. And so these two characters are showing their agency in this moment, pursuing their own happiness, their own good at the expense of the larger sort of wishes of their kingdoms. And I just love that this theme was carried all the way through this book in a really compelling way. From that moment to when Dervil goes off and wants to pursue the cauldron with Merlin, when Arthur wants him and his warriors to stay for fighting the Saxons. But Dervil thinks, no, this is what's most important, and I have competing oaths and competing priorities, and he's deciding, yes, I'm going with Merlin, this is what's most important for me to do, and he does it. And that was a really cool little fantasy quest to get the cauldron, and I thought maybe Merlin was a goner for a while. But they got the cauldron, they come back, they rejoin Arthur, and Arthur becomes the great warlord of United Britain and is defeating Ael's troops, and there's a really great battle scene there, and you're thinking, okay, he's going to defeat back the Saxons until freaking Lancelot comes with Cerdic's Saxon forces to put a huge wrench in the gears of Arthur's plans. Instead of being able to defeat Ael's Saxon forces and then move on to Cerdic's, he's now forced to create a peace with Cerdic and Ael, and it seems like Lancelot was plotting behind the scenes, and now he's getting a Saxon guard. Seems like he's really in tight with Cerdic, and Arthur just refuses to see the truth. Even the Dervil's telling him, other people are saying how horrible Lancelot is, but Arthur feels like he owes this king his loyalty and basically is blind to the practical realities of what's going on. And this is encapsulated in such a moving sequence that is the scene where Arthur and Dervil go to find Tristan, their ally, who had absconded with his horrible king father's new bride because they fell in love. They came to Dumnonia, and now Arthur and Dervil are faced with this conundrum of whether they help their ally and defy this foreign King Mark. And we have this amazing argument play out between Dervil and Arthur, where Arthur basically says there would be chaos if we didn't honor kings and follow their traditions and privileges, and I have to go with King Mark here and side with this horrible, detestable person and lead to the deaths of Tristan. And then Dervil tries to fight as his champion but can't, and it's just a really tragic scene when Tristan dies and the young Iseult gets burned alive. And that, I think, was used as a very powerful kind of metaphor for this larger ethical dilemma that was the theme of this book, where Arthur cannot look past just the very basic traditional morality of the monarchical system of, kings are basically the final arbiters of what's right, and that, it's not up to the individual person to determine what's right. And Derval is taking on this role of being more flexible and deciding in the moment during changing circumstances what's right at that moment. And it completely seems to lead to Arthur's tragic circumstances at the end of this book. But in the middle, actually, there's all this time of peace where years are passing and there's no wars, there's no battles. There's a really, really nice domestic scenes with Derval and living with Cynwyn and having his daughters. Doesn't spend much time on that, but that was really impactful, both as wonderful sort of scenes of the peaceful life that Derval is loving and that Arthur wishes he could have with Guinevere and his kids. And though at the same time there's this undercurrent of dread, there's these hints that the Christians are kind of preparing to rebel or kind of cause a lot of trouble. And there's hints that, Lancelot's, continuing to plot, and Guinevere is doing mysterious things. And so there are hints that things are going to go very badly. And so during this peaceful portion in the middle of this book, there's this sense of dread, which pays off spectacularly when Mordred finally comes of age, and now this very evil, completely amoral teenager is now a king, and Derval and Arthur have to listen to him. And I was really scared, actually, the scene where Mordred became king, and Derval's friend Killick, I think, challenges Mordred's right to be king, and then Derval, though, when Mordred orders him to kill Killick, Derval just does not follow his oath that he just made to the new King Mordred. He goes over to Killick and says, "I'm not going to fight you. If you do this, you can kill me." And so Derval goes with his heart, knows what's right for him, doesn't listen to the king. And then I was really worried in that moment what was going to happen. But luckily Derval got off with just a few slaps by Mordred. But that was yet another moment that showed this theme of characters having their own agency and not just listening to kings. The dread really starts to ramp up, though, when Mordred tells Arthur and Derval they have to go up north somewhere to capture an old traitor. And it seems like Sansom was putting him up to this, and so something terrible is going to happen when they're out of the kingdom. And it does, of course. They come back, and things are burning, and then Lancelot marries a corpse. I mean, that was insane. And then you're worried that Derval's whole family is getting killed, but he gets back just in time to stop that massacre from happening. And his youngest daughter, though, who was introduced as this lively sprite who took after Derval and was just the apple of his eye, gets killed by one of Dinas or Levane, those horrible druid priests on Lancelot's team. And so just the worst possible thing happens, and the audiobook narrator Keeble here just delivered this whole scene so touchingly and heartbreakingly. And it was just really hard to read that part. And they can't pause, they can't grieve, they have to run and regroup and see who's alive. Is Arthur alive? Is Mordred alive? They have to all regroup, which they do, and then it's just breathless because they're thinking, what do we do? Do we try to treat with Lancelot? Do we try to attack him? And Arthur goes boldly to rescue Guinevere and his son, who are at some palace under supposed guard of Lancelot. But really, Guinevere's there by choice, and most people would probably have known that, but Arthur was blind to the reality of his wife, and was living in his own reality where other people are honorable, where his wife is his soulmate. And that was just it all came down crashing upon him in tragic fashion when and he prepared flowers to give Guinevere, which was so touching and sad, and he got his son, and then he walks in on the Isis mysteries where Guinevere is about to engage in this sexual rite with Tweedledum and Tweedledee, the druidic priests, and Arthur's world comes crashing down upon him, and then Arthur, I think, realizes that the world was not the way that he had hoped it was, and so just from that moment, things are very tragic all around. And luckily, though, he recognizes what he has to do. They take over Carrick Dern, and they completely outfox Lancelot, and who refuses to fight, even though he had the advantage. And so now Lancelot's on the run. But really, this was a book, I think, about Derval and Arthur and their competing worldviews, and Arthur being like a Ned Stark type figure, too trusting, too honorable, and not practical enough for the world that he's living in, and to, leading to him being taken advantage of by all different players in this game, and others, though, having more agency, being maybe a little more enlightened, and not just blindly following tradition and the rules of monarchy. And Arthur seems to come around to this at the end when he realizes that Mordred can't be the ruler and the king anymore, that he'll basically rule and take over from Mordred. And so there's some growth there, but it all feels too late and very tragic. And honestly, it just ends on such a tragic note for Arthur. And what is going to happen with him and Guinevere now? I'm very interested to see what happens with that relationship in the next book, and how Derval recovers now that his youngest daughter got killed. And I'm worried that they're not going to be able to figure out what to do with the Saxons that are invading, and Lancelot's still out there and he's going to cause trouble. So there's so much that this set up that is compelling. I was absolutely just blown away by that whole last section, and all of the character work and the build-up and setup that has been done in book 1 and throughout book 2 just led to one of the most gripping climactic sections of a book I can ever remember. So bravo, Bernard Cornwell. This was a spectacular read, and I think this third book is going to be similar style of read for me, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out. So hopefully you enjoyed Enemy of God as much as I did, and I'll see you later.